This episode of Paratopia is dedicated to Mac Tonys. Rest in peace, Mac.
In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Don't be shy.
DMT? I can't get my driver's license renewed there.
Come on, you can shake it.
Yeah. I haven't drank a brown brew in the jungle since that time I accidentally swallowed vomit.
Anything goes at Paratopia. And welcome.
Fingerprints of the Gods, The Message of the Sphinx, The Mars Mystery, Talisman, Supernatural. This man has written and co-written a cajillion famous books. He needs no introduction. In fact, this is overkill. He is author-explorer Graham Hancock.
Hey, Paratopia, our guest tonight, Mr. Graham Hancock. Graham, thanks a lot for being on the show tonight. We really appreciate you coming by.
That's my pleasure, Jeff. I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
I'm curious, Graham, with all of the books that you've written, and you're like the only author that I've come across on Amazon that has multiple pages. You wrote tons of books on archaeological finds, on all sorts of archaeological mysteries and thoughts. How did you get to this? Really, the reason we sought you out was the ayahuasca and the other compounds. How did you go from one to the other?
That's my most recent book, Supernatural, which looks at shamanism and altered states of consciousness. It's been a long journey. There's not been a particular plan. I just found myself steered by the material I explored. I mean, if we go way back to the 1970s and 1980s, I was a journalist. I was a mainstream journalist. My last full-time sort of journalistic role was as East Africa correspondent for The Economist, a serious political and economics magazine. Right through to sort of mid to late 80s, I remained very much focused on current affairs, but I stumbled across a mystery in Ethiopia, which absolutely intrigued me, and this was Ethiopia's claim to possess the lost Ark of the Covenant. And initially I began to explore this just for fun, not really with an intention of writing anything about it. But as time went on, I found that I was sitting on top of a major story, and ended up writing a huge book about it called The Sign and the Seal, a quest for the lost Ark of the Covenant. And this was really the beginning for me of an adventure that was to last 15 years, exploring historical mysteries. And I went on from that book. While researching The Sign and the Seal, I had to travel not only to Ethiopia, but also to Israel and to Egypt. And in Egypt in 1989, I was confronted for the first time with the Great Pyramids and the extraordinary majesty and perfection of those structures. And they struck a chord in my imagination, and I began to ask questions about ancient Egypt, which I found were not satisfactorily answered by mainstream academics. And this eventually led to my book, Fingerprints of the Gods, and to a whole series of other books that looked into the possibility of a lost civilization. Could there have been a forgotten episode in human history more than 12,000 years ago. And that adventure, that inquiry, culminated in 2002 with a book called Underworld, which was the product of more than 6 years of scuba diving all around the world, looking for submerged ruins, for structures that had been covered by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age, more than 12,000 years ago. And finally, to cut a long story short, following on from that, I felt that I had made my contribution to the lost civilization mystery, and I wanted to turn back to something else that had intrigued me for a very long time. This was the question of human origins. But as I really got into the investigation of human origins, I found that the real story lies not millions of years ago, but just tens of thousands of years ago, when the first great cave art, rock and cave paintings began to be created all over the world, between 40 and 30,000 years ago. And it was the investigation of the mystery of cave art that led me to shamanism and to traveling to the Amazon and drinking the extraordinary visionary brew known as ayahuasca, the vine of souls, which shamans believe allows them to project their consciousness into the spirit world, into what we would call a parallel universe. And the lessons that ayahuasca taught me, as well as enabling me to write my book, Supernatural, because I always believe that I must put myself into my story. I can't just sit in an armchair and speculate. I have to explore the mystery directly. Well, those lessons I learned from ayahuasca are still with me today and guiding the future direction of my life. So it's just been one thing after another rather than a particular plan, a sense of mystery, a sense of intrigue, wanting to explore the unexplained.
Now, you mentioned, we saw you speak at the X conference this past year.
Yeah.
And one of the first things you mentioned in that lecture was the Chauvet Caverns. Am I correct?
Yeah, the cave of Chauvet in southern France, yes.
And those were some of the, if I understand it right, those are some of the first cave art paintings that actually, I don't know, delved into more complex ideas.
Well, actually, this is just about the oldest art that has survived from anywhere in the world. Are the absolutely incredible and amazing paintings of Chauvet Cave. They date back 32,000 years, They consist of an extraordinary array of beautiful, beautiful images, which would stand beside any of the greatest modern art in terms of technical accomplishment, but which feature supernatural beings, visionary sequences. We see creatures that are part animal and part human. We see the figure of a woman in the process of transforming into a lion. We see a man who's part bison and part human. And it's clear from the imagery that these are not pictures of men and women dressed up in skins. These are pictures of human beings caught in the process of transformation from one state to another. And this is one of the clues that tells us that those artists were exploring visionary experiences. And I make the case in my book, Supernatural, that they were exploring visionary experiences through the use of the little mushroom that we call the liberty cap today, Psilocybe semilanceata. There are distinct motifs in the paintings which make it absolutely clear that those artists had experienced deeply altered states of consciousness and had returned to what we would call a normal state of consciousness to make their paintings, recollecting what they had seen in the visionary state. And the amazing thing is that these images from those caves more than 30,000 years ago, you can find very similar images being painted in the Amazon today by shamans following journeys that they have made with the visionary brew known as ayahuasca. It seems that although separated by tens of thousands of years of time and thousands of miles of geography, the artists were entering the same non-ordinary reality and returning with documentation of what they'd seen there. And this just struck me as a very exciting idea and one worth exploring.
Now, the mushroom, you have also experimented with that as well as ayahuasca, am I correct?
Yes, I've experimented with quite a number of visionary substances, and I did so initially because it was necessary to do so in order to conduct the research for my book. But I've found these experiences to be so valuable, both at a number of different levels. In terms of personal development, one of the mysteries of ayahuasca, this strange brew from the Amazon, is that you are shown episodes from your own life in an extremely clear and unsympathetic manner. You know, we often behave badly towards other people, but we provide ourselves with excuses for why it was okay for us to be mean and nasty like that.
Sure.
But ayahuasca shows you very clearly how you actually behaved and gives you an opportunity to change your behavior, to make yourself a better person. This is a universal experience of anyone, anywhere in the world who drinks ayahuasca. And then secondly, much more mysterious, the sense of being plunged into a seamlessly convincing parallel world, which is inhabited by intelligent entities, which can take many forms. The most common form is the form of serpents, of huge snakes. Again, almost everyone who drinks ayahuasca will encounter these serpents. They're not terrifying. They seem warm and friendly. They seem like teachers. But also of creatures that are part animal and part human in form, and sometimes fully human. You have the sense that you are dealing almost with the gods and goddesses of antiquity, who speak to you in a direct and clear manner, and very frequently provide inspiration. It's not an accident that a number of great artists working today, Alex Gray, for example, or Martina Hoffman and Robert Venosa, have been hugely inspired by their experiences with ayahuasca to produce stunningly beautiful and transformative visionary art. Now, in my own case, I'm not a painter. I really can't draw or paint anything to save my life, but I am a writer. And I've found that my writing has received a huge inspiration from my experiences with ayahuasca, such that for the past 2 years, I have been sitting at my desk writing my first work of fiction, a fantasy adventure novel, which will be published in the U.S. in the fall of 2010. And that novel, the inspiration for that novel came directly from ayahuasca, like a massive download of information, so that I almost felt I was channeling it rather than simply writing it. And so these are mysteries that are hard to explain. Why should a combination of two plants from the Amazon jungle put us into this state which causes us to examine our personal lives, to seek to make ourselves better people, to have experience of parallel realms and the beings that inhabit them, and to have our own creativity boosted? It's why I gave the subtitle "Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind" to the book I wrote about all this, which was, of course, supernatural.
Right. I think one of the biggest mysteries, at least for us on this show, has been, we had Dennis McKenna, brother of Terrence, on the show not long ago.
Yes.
Where we discussed the psilocybin mushroom and ayahuasca together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that seems to fascinate me more than anything else is the shared experiences by more than one person, much like Strassman's book talks about DMT
Yes.
and the entities that people seem to encounter in a regular way.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
That's something that really kind of eats at me about exactly what are we experiencing in a hallucinogenic state.
Yeah.
But not only that, but where ultimately do these substances come from?
Yes.
McKenna postulated that he thought that because it was the only 4-phosphorylated end-all on the planet, that the mushroom could be an alien artifact of some sort.
Yes.
What do you think of that kind of thought?
I think a lot of those kind of explanations. The experiences that we are plunged into with these substances are so profound and so transformative that we really do need to consider what is going on here. And I mean, they literally are transformative. The case I make in my book, Supernatural, is that we were put on the path to being fully human by these substances, that all human creativity and all human spirituality is really missing from the archaeological record until we have until the first great art inspired by these substances appears. They seem to have set us on a new track and in a new direction, and literally opened our minds and allowed us to achieve our evolutionary potential. It's truly an extraordinary mystery. In the case of ayahuasca, which is not a fungus, it's ayahuasca is a mixture of two plants. One of them is the ayahuasca vine. The botanical name is Banisteriopsis carpi, and the other is the leaves of a bush that is known in the Amazon as chacruna. The botanical name is Psychotria viridis. These two plants only work in combination. They don't produce visionary experiences separately. You have to mix them together. And so the Amazonian shamans were selecting from more than 150,000 different species of plants and trees in the Amazon the precise two that would lead to these visionary experiences. And when asked to explain how it was that their ancestors stumbled across this combination of plants, they say that it was the spirits themselves who taught them. And I think this kind of reasoning leads us to consider the notion of some kind of extraterrestrial intervention. But I want to emphasize that I'm using that word perhaps more broadly than the way that it's normally used. I am not talking about physical aliens who've come here in nuts and bolts spaceships
right.
from the other side of this physical universe. In other words, beings basically like us from within space-time as we are. I think the problem's much more interesting and much more complicated than that. I think that we're dealing with interdimensional contact here. That's what I would put my money on. That's what I would bet on if I were a betting man. That what these experiences are allowing us to do are to make contact across the dimensions with other levels and grades of reality. I think reality is just so much more complicated and mysterious than the everyday quote-unquote reality that surrounds us. Of course, we're physical beings. We are evolved to function physically at this level in this realm, and most of the time our consciousness is focused on physical survival. And what this does, while it supremely adapts us to physical life on this planet, is it cuts us off from the wider reality. And I think what these plants, what all of them do, whether it's psilocybe mushrooms or ayahuasca, or indeed mescaline and a whole range of other visionary substances, is that they retune the receiver wavelength of the brain and allow us to connect with a far wider reality, which is always there, which surrounds us all the time, which interpenetrates our lives in every way, but which is not normally accessible to our senses. And to take this line of argument a little further, I would say it is our destiny and our birthright to be connected to that wider reality, and that those plants are here, that they have co-evolved with us on this planet precisely in order to allow us to do so. Should we live in societies that shut our minds down, that close us off, that prevent us from recognizing our connection to the totality, there's always a back door provided by these plants which we can open and reconnect with those realms, whether or not society wants us to do so.
All right. That kind of brings me to the next thing of, we talk about the brain a lot as a dampener on this show, and some of these compounds actually tuning the brain differently to perceive things that are always all around us. And one of the things that we've heard from some of our listeners who have experimented with some of these, and Jeremy and I actually, after much deliberation and delay, finally ate mushrooms not horribly long ago. And while our experiences were similar, we had much different experiences apart from it. There were a lot of things that were subtly similar, but by and large, I would say they were quite different.
You can expect
a lot of people,
that. You can
sure.
expect that, I should say, because you bring to the table your own different backgrounds and experiences, and these are the filter through which you receive all of reality.
One of the things that's often brought up, I mean, when we're talking about everything from DMT to ayahuasca to the mushroom, is that a lot of people would argue that there are not beings there that they've seen. They haven't had that experience. And I guess my kind of go-to answer all the time, and you can tell me what you think of this as somebody who's much more experienced than I am, is that dosage based on weight and probably a host of other reasons that people don't get through a sub-threshold experience to actually get to that right tuning fork of the brain place.
Yeah, I think you put your finger on the heart of the matter. This is when we talk about retuning the receiver wavelength of the brain of the human creature, we're talking about a very subtle and complex process in which many factors play a part. One of those factors is the substance itself. But other factors are the biochemistry of each individual and the setting in which the substance is consumed. If the setting is wrong or uncomfortable or disconcerting to any individual, then that individual will not have such a full experience as a person who is comfortable and relaxed and safe in the setting. So I would say that in order to explore these experiences to the depth that they can be, the first and most important thing to do is to create an absolutely safe, nurturing, reassuring space, and that the journey should be guided by some shaman-like figure. If not an experienced shaman from the Amazon jungle, then a Western shaman who has explored these realms, who has accumulated enormous experience in exploring these realms. The presence of that experienced individual or individuals is an important part of the journey. If you undertake the journey totally disoriented and disturbed and afraid of what you're going to confront, it will inevitably affect the experience you have. Now, some people might argue that because individuals have a range of different experiences, that this suggests that the experience itself is not real. But we have to remember that in everyday life, different people also experience the same things in different ways. When you compare notes, you can realize you were all seeing the same thing, but we often experience it in different ways. If a crime is carried out and there are 10 witnesses to the crime, each one of them will give a different description of the perpetrator.
Sure.
Once you sit down and actually go through the fine detail, you might recognize resemblances in what they've seen. But because they're bringing their own perceptual mindset to the party, naturally their mindset affects what they see. We human beings can't see anything without interpreting it. We interpret perceptions from the get-go, and these interpretations that we impose on the perceptions account for a large amount of the variety. But actually, when you look more deeply at this, what's really stunning and striking is the transpersonal similarities in experiences. And these similarities are just so great that you begin to have to ask yourself whether the individuals concerned are not all visiting the same parallel world, and that's why they're coming back with the same reports, admittedly mediated by their own personalities and by the set and setting, but still recognizably the same reports, like explorers going to a distant country and returning and giving accounts of their experiences. A huge number of common factors are ultimately to be found.
Right. I guess the ultimate question here is, out of your at X conference, I think you said it was some 30 odd times that you had drank ayahuasca.
Yeah, it's increased slightly since the X conference.
Woohoo!
I persist with ayahuasca, and it's my view that ideally I will aim to drink ayahuasca 4 or 5 times a year, as long as I am still functioning on this planet. It has proved, so I would not say it, I want to say she, because ayahuasca is an entity and a being. This is not simply a matter of plants. Everybody who's worked with ayahuasca extensively will tell you this. The shamans of the Amazon will tell you this, that there is a female spirit who lies behind ayahuasca, whose business is the planet, but who loves and cares for humanity in a tough love kind of way. Mm-hmm. This is no soppy love. This is tough love that ayahuasca delivers. And I've found my experiences with ayahuasca so beneficial and so positive for every area of my life that I intend to continue with this work. I regard it as work. I intend to continue enrolled in the school of ayahuasca.
Graham, what have you, I mean, this question always bears asking, is that you've done this so many times. Is there anything that you could put your finger on that's been conveyed to you in these places, these states?
Well,
that you wouldn't know, that you come back and you go, there's no way I could have known that. My own mind couldn't have contained that. I know that there's a certain amount of astonishment with any of these things. But has any information ever been imparted to you that is just so outside of your range of knowledge that this had to be from somewhere else?
Well, listen, as I mentioned a few moments ago, I've spent, the last 20 plus years, more actually. I've been writing since the early 1970s, 30 plus years, writing analytical non-fiction, very detailed inquiries, admittedly into historical mysteries, but often with 1,000 footnotes, fully referenced throughout, very thoroughly researched works. And what ayahuasca has done has given me a huge kick up the ass and reawakened or completely awakened my creativity. The novel that I've just finished writing, I had no idea that I had that novel in me. I don't believe I did have it in me. I think it was given to me by this extraordinary visionary plant, but the plant behind which lies what I would call a supernatural entity. I know that sounds very mysterious and very strange. There may be people out there who'll laugh at that, but I spent the last 2 years writing this story down. And that story was not present in my mind before I had the ayahuasca journey, just as some of the great art by the artists I mentioned earlier was not present in their minds before they had the ayahuasca journey. So new information is being added. If you're asking me, have I been given a specific information but with which I can absolutely prove that parallel universes exist? Well, the answer to that is no.
No, right.
The experience is more tricky than that. It's not a matter of pat answers. It's a matter of setting each individual on a process which will be ultimately beneficial. And on a grand scale, helpful to the human race, just as when our ancestors first began to encounter these substances 30 or 40,000 years ago, it switched them onto a new track. Just as in the 1960s, a huge burst of creativity was unleashed in human consciousness. I mean, just look at the music of the 60s. Look at the computer revolution that grew out of all of that, to see how new information was added to the human collective by the experiences that we had in those times. Now, of course, dark and negative forces in society have struck down and tried to suppress those experiences and fill us with terror and fear about where these substances lead us. But those forces are the dark side, and they are wrong. And the human yearning to explore the beyond and the possibility to do so through these amazing plants that have co-evolved on the planet with us remains.
Well, before I throw it over to Jeremy, and this is kind of a two-part question. You mentioned in your X conference lecture that in these visions you have seen what we would call aliens and UFOs.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about if you could walk us through that experience, but also outside of the experiences that you've had with ayahuasca and all of these others, have you ever had any kind of manifestation in front of you, UFO sighting, since starting this process?
No. I only gain access to those experiences in altered states of consciousness, most efficiently with DMT in its pure form, smoked, and intriguingly in depth in a longer-term kind of journey with ayahuasca. Now, ayahuasca contains DMT. The DMT that we can smoke in a pipe and the DMT that is consumed in ayahuasca are the same thing. But interestingly, there's an enzyme in the stomach that destroys DMT on contact. So normally, were you to eat or drink a pure DMT potion, it would have no effect on you whatsoever. And what's amazing about the Amazonian brew is that the vine that is mixed with the leaves that contains DMT, the vine contains a molecule that switches off that enzyme in our stomachs and allows DMT to be absorbed orally. So in the case of ayahuasca, your DMT experience, but it is not the same as smoked DMT. There are similarities, but it's different. It goes on for hours, for 3 to 4 hours, but interrupted by episodes of incredible nausea and vomiting, which do take your mind off the experience. Pure DMT in smoked form is a very short-lasting experience, lasts for 12 to 15 minutes at the most, is not interrupted by nausea. Some people find it almost too overwhelming to bear. It is such a strong experience. It just pulls you out of your body like an elevator going up a lift shaft at tremendous speed. And that in itself can be a bit disorienting. But in answer to your question, it is only in altered states of consciousness that I personally have been able to have these experiences of contact with entities that are not of this level of material reality that we call planet Earth, that are of some other level, and I believe some other dimension. Now, the research that I go into in Supernatural makes it abundantly clear that there are individuals who are capable of entering a spontaneous visionary state. and making contact with these other realities without the need to take any of the plant allies that help the rest of us to get there. And there are other techniques that don't involve plants or substances. For example, certain kinds of rhythmic dancing and drumming, which can detach our focus from day-to-day life and allow the broader reality to creep in. The point that I make in the book is that down the ages, in different cultures and places, human beings have always been reporting contact with the other, with entities and beings that appear to be not of this earth, not of daily physical reality. And for shamans in hunter-gatherer societies, whether in the Amazon or Southern Africa or elsewhere, these beings are spoken of and construed as spirits or as gods and goddesses. In Europe, in the Middle Ages, right through until the 1940s, really, for about 1,000 years, these beings were construed as fairies and elves. And in the modern world, really from the time that it became embarrassing to speak about fairies and elves, which was round about the 1940s, the experience transformed and became an experience of contact with what we now construe to be aliens or extraterrestrials. But the case that I make, and I'm not alone in making this case, I need to cite the absolutely extraordinary, groundbreaking work of Jacques Vallée in his wonderful book, Passport to Magonia, published in 1969. In many respects, what I did was simply take that argument forward, adding all the new evidence that has become available since 1969. That what we're talking about here is the exact same experience viewed through different cultural spectacles. Spirits amongst shamans and hunter-gatherers, fairies and elves in medieval Europe, aliens in the modern world. It's not surprising that we construe them as aliens and extraterrestrials who've come here in spaceships, because ours is the generation that has witnessed the exploration of space by our own species. So we apply that particular framework to the experience. But when you analyze in detail the reports of these contacts with spirits, with fairies, and with aliens, you find that they're all absolutely, without any doubt in my mind, talking about the same beings and entities with the same descriptions of their appearance and the same accounts of their behavior. They've been interacting with the human race in various disguises for thousands of years, and their purpose seems to be to bring us on, to help us to become what we can become.
Jeremy.
Well, then the question becomes, there are multiple witness UFO sightings, and there are multiple well-documented abduction cases, such as the Allagash case, I believe, out of Maine. So does that not imply that these things do have a physicality in this world to them?
Oh, yes. No, I didn't mean to rule that out at all. I do think they have a physicality. I think, as I've said earlier in our discussion, I think it's more likely that we're dealing with an extremely mysterious interdimensional contact than a relatively simple interstellar space contact here. I think that we're looking at entities who have developed, for want of a better word, a technology to jump from dimension to dimension. Perhaps that technology is the flying saucer. It used to be the fairy dance. It used to be a kind of circular dance. If you got close to fairies dancing in a circle, if you were to touch that whirling circle of dancers, you would be drawn into it and carried through into another world. There you might experience time passing. You think you've spent a day there, but when they bring you back, you find that sometimes, in some cases, hundreds of years have passed. Time seems to operate differently in those realms. I do think definitely there is a physical aspect to this experience. I do think that the entities from other dimensions have found ways to interact with us, not only at the level of consciousness, but also at the level of physicality. And therefore, it isn't surprising that we do find physical traces of this experience. But what's interesting is the clearly psychic nature of this experience as well. For example, Rick Strassman's volunteers on his DMT project at the University of New Mexico were clearly having experiences that were very similar to, if not identical to, the experiences of people who reported being abducted by UFOs. But in the case of Rick Strassman's volunteers, physically, they clearly were not abducted because their bodies were under observation lying on a hospital bed in the University of New Mexico. Nevertheless, it seemed that their consciousness was abducted. So I think we probably shouldn't, try to impose hard and fast boundaries on these mysterious experiences. We should accept from the outset the obvious evidence that there is a physical element and there is a psychic element to this experience. And after all, why should that surprise us? Because we are both physical and psychic beings ourselves.
So why is it that you think I don't know. I don't know if devolved is the right word, but sort of branched off and became rational materialists and gave up the spirit world. Do you think that was a mistake, or do you think it was a growth process of sort of species individuation and will blend back in?
I'll tell you the answer to that as far as I see it, and this goes back into the oldest religious traditions as well. It's obvious to me that there's good and evil at work in the universe and in the totality, good and evil. And this is true in what we call the spirit world, as it is true in the physical daily world. And I think there are negative forces and entities at work which would do everything they can to see that human potential is not realized, but is shut down and closed off and not explored. If you go back to the Gnostic texts, which were linked to early Christianity, but radically different from early Christianity, you'll find they depict a realm in which beings that they call archons do everything possible to shut down human potential. And I think that's what's happened. I think we've devolved back away from the incredible spiritual journeys that our ancestors were making in the Stone Age, and still do in hunter-gatherer societies today. We in Western industrial society have had that faculty shut down, and it's been shut down by negative spiritual forces which operate in the human domain. A struggle is going on, a cosmic struggle between light and darkness, and our role as human beings is to choose, to make a choice between the two. And by shutting down our faculties, our ability to choose clearly is taken away from us. And all I can say is, thank goodness the back doors exist. Thank goodness the mystery of ayahuasca and of the psilocybe mushrooms exists, and that we can, through these plants, reconnect with wider reality.
Why would they care? Why would they want to shut us down?
Well, you get into the simple question of good and evil there, and this is ultimately something that cannot be simply answered. But if you go back to the ancient texts, they envisage a war in heaven, if you like, between forces that seek growth, development, the nurturing of potential, goodness, light, creativity, warmth, beauty, and forces, for whatever reason, that are devoted to darkness and horror and misery and despair and the absolute absence of potential. And I think if you look around the world today, you can see that we as a species, that our dilemma, our predicament, is precisely the overwhelming power of negative forces and the desperate need to struggle against them.
Mm-hmm. All right. So getting back to your ayahuasca journeys, what is the sort of common thread that happens in all of them? Is there must be, right? Do you go to the same place? Do you
common
see the
thread
same
is
things?
the common thread wherever you drink ayahuasca, be it in a city, be it in the jungle, is that you will often find yourself experientially in an enchanted, highly organic jungle world, filled with intelligent entities, often in the form of serpents, who greet you and speak to you. The spirit of ayahuasca herself, as she is recognized by shamans in the Amazon, very frequently takes the form of a gigantic serpent. I had an encounter with this being during an ayahuasca journey where she wrapped herself around my body and rested a huge head on my shoulder and just looked me in the eyes for 2 hours. And what that was about was a period in my life where I was feeling very low and negative about myself, unable to love myself. And what that experience taught me was that I should love myself and not concentrate on the negative, but look at the positive in my life. And it was a very positive, transformatory experience. I've heard similar experiences reported to me by many who drink ayahuasca. Going on through the jungle, one often comes to cities made of crystal or glass with extraordinary flying vehicles moving around inside them. It really is quite stunning and strange, and it is an experience that is shared in common by many, many, many people. I mean, what I would recommend to listeners, if they want to go in depth into this shared phenomenology, that is the word that the scientists give to it, is to look at the book called The Antipodes of the Mind by Benny Shannon. He's the professor of psychology at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Benny's drunk ayahuasca around about 400 times now. So he has personally charted those realms, and he has documented the experiences of hundreds of other people who've drunk ayahuasca, and it's eerie and stunning, the astonishing commonalities that emerge from this detailed scientific study.
When you had, first of all, what was it that, was it the ayahuasca or something else that you took when you had the abduction type experiences?
It was ayahuasca. I had abduction type experiences in ayahuasca. Once in the jungle in Peru, for example, I found myself transported to a strange and terrifying space. A tunnel of light opened up above me. There seemed to be a huge disc-like ship whirling in the sky. Off to the side of it was a face that, well, very like the typical faces of greys that we see depicted in the popular media today, but with segmented eyes like a fly. And there was something dark and scary about this entity, and I found myself resisting, and I actually shouted out loud, "No, I refuse!" And I opened my eyes wide and stopped the experience happening. This is one of the things that you can often do with ayahuasca, is you can stop the experience, or at least temporarily halt it, by opening your eyes. Now, in retrospect, I hugely regret doing that. I should have had the courage to just throw myself into the experience, and I would say that's one of the things I've learned to do subsequently, is to surrender to the experience, to embrace the experience rather than fighting it. But I fought it, and I canceled that experience, whatever it was going to lead to. But it did feel to me very much that I was about to be taken, and I didn't want to be taken, and therefore resisted it.
Did the sort of mind's eye environment that this thing was embedded in, was it the same jungle situation as normal ayahuasca experiences?
Yeah, good question. Yes, it was a jungle type of environment, but what dominated the scene was this tunnel or funnel of light that opened up above me.
When you do these different the different substances, do the places that they bring you have a different feeling to them in terms of their reality?
Yes, they do. And this is a very curious thing about DMT, dimethyltryptamine, because as I mentioned, DMT is the primary active ingredient in ayahuasca. But ayahuasca almost always plunges me into this organic realm filled with organic life of some sort. This life is radiant with intelligence and a kind of supernatural power, but it is clearly organic life. Whereas DMT in pure form, smoked, almost always takes me into a much more almost machine-like, very, very geometrical, very ordered, almost technological realm, which has things like objects made of strange glass and machinery inside it. But again, a feeling of enchantment, a feeling that magicians are at work. The last time I smoked DMT, I had 3 DMT experiences in a row in a period of about 2 hours. And these 3 experiences, each of which lasted no more than 15 minutes, seemed to unfold in a process, and the process began. It was to do with healing. I came out of that experience, which wasn't so long ago actually, feeling healed. And I've continued to feel that way. Mm-hmm. And it began with circular lights moving over my body, rotating half a turn one way, 3/4 of a turn the other way. They were circles of lights, so there were 5 or 6 little lights in a circle, which moved very rapidly all over my body, but particularly concentrated around my head, rotating back in the other direction, moving around me, and no entity was seen, but it was clear to me that these lights were diagnosing faults in my body and putting them right. And as the experiences unfolded, in the 3rd experience, I found myself just in this extraordinary, enchanted space where, first of all, I saw an insect made of crystal, of silver crystal, balanced up on its hind legs, a large creature which seemed to be studying me in a dispassionate, not a terrifying, not a hateful way, but rather a dispassionate way, much as perhaps we might examine an insect in daily life. And 2 magicians, I can only describe them as magicians, moving around and making the most extraordinary hand movements as they moved around my body. And again, I got the sense of a work being done on me, and I emerged from that experience enormously reassured, with a feeling that quite a number of issues that had been troubling me in my life had been sorted out and cleared up, and I have been feeling pretty good since then. I have no absolute explanation for what's going on here. I can only tell you that it is the most extraordinary mystery, that it is worth exploring it. I need to add a caution, of course. This is a very serious business. This is not something to be undertaken lightly. This is not something to be undertaken recreationally. This is one of the mistakes that our society makes in dealing with substances like this, and I think it makes that mistake because of so much confusing misinformation that's been pumped out by the so-called war on drugs. Mm-hmm. We need to view these substances as very, very serious matters indeed, and that when we make these journeys, we have to accept that sometimes the journeys will be terrifying and disorienting, mm-hmm. and it will not always be easy, and we may have absolutely frightening and disturbing experiences as well as positive and reassuring experiences. But that is true of any worthwhile experience in this world today. We can't expect everything to be sugar-coated. There will be challenges and difficulties. We have to prepare ourselves psychically and emotionally for those challenges and difficulties. We have to know that they may be there, but nevertheless, once all precautions are taken, once a safe and nurturing setting is provided, once an experienced guide is in place, I believe it is worth embracing and exploring those experiences.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any insight into where it would take you after? I mean, it seems like it's healing you physically and psychologically, and once you've sort of perfected those realms, what happens next?
I'm not sure, because it is a process, it is a school. You don't get to take the next lesson until you finish the previous one. All I know for sure in my case is that I definitely have received an enormous boost to my creativity. I've been allowed to explore areas as a writer that I never imagined that I would go into before, and I found that exploration of new forms of writing, new for me, to be absolutely fulfilling and indeed exciting. Very, 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 very exciting work. And I feel that I have more to download from the other realms. Actually the novel I told you about is in 2 volumes, and I think I've pretty much got I've written volume 1. I think I've pretty much got volume 2 downloaded, but I don't absolutely count on that, and I intend to go back and revisit these realms thanks to the grace of these plants.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're coming up on an hour just about, so I want to hit you with 3 questions about your archaeological work. Mm-hmm. Well, the first one, let's make it a segue question, which is how has all of this now affected the way you look at, the time of the pyramids?
I think if you what's clear to me and wasn't clear to me when I began to explore historical mysteries is again the role of altered states of consciousness in the work that the ancient Egyptians were doing. Just look at the ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses, whether it is Thoth, the god of wisdom, with the head of an ibis, a certain kind of bird, or Horus with the head of a hawk, the Sphinx, a lion-bodied creature with the head of a man, Anubis, the guide of souls through the underworld, the body of a man and the head of a jackal. These kind of entities and beings are the absolute normal experience of altered states of consciousness, and therefore it's obvious to me that the ancient Egyptians were deliberately cultivating and exploring and pursuing altered states of consciousness. Their primary interest was in the question of what happens to us when we die. That's what the books of the dead are all about. They're manuals for the afterlife journey that our soul must take when we transit. Mm-hmm. And they're designed to prepare us and set us up for that journey so that we're alert and aware and ready to deal with the challenges there. And I don't think this was a work of imagination on the part of the Egyptian priests. I think this was a work of experience and exploration.
Mm-hmm. One of our listeners had asked me to ask you if you have been able to make it back to the underwater, potential city off the coast of Japan.
Yeah, I've done more than 200 dives at Yonaguni, which is the series of underwater structures that your listener is referring to. But the last dive I did there was in 2002. And I haven't been back to dive at that site since 2002. I hope to return and do more diving there, but because it's a wonderful, magical place to dive, it's also quite a daunting place to dive with extremely severe currents, and I have come near to losing my life there on 2 occasions while diving at that site. Mm-hmm. I've made my best shot at doing the work, and it's described at length in my book Underworld, but I'm not saying that I'll never go back.
Well, when this must be the place that I had seen also on National Geographic, right, where they sort of they always end up poo-pooing and everything and saying, well, it's just a natural structure. Do you get the sense that it could be a natural structure?
No, absolutely not. It's definitely man-made. The reason for the confusion is twofold. Firstly, it is hewn or cut out of solid bedrock. It isn't built up of blocks except in one or two places. And when something is cut from solid bedrock, this always allows skeptics to suggest that it might have natural causes. The second problem is that most of the skeptics who say it's natural haven't been there, haven't dived on the site. And the very few who have dived are such incompetent and useless divers that they've only been able to spend minutes around the structures instead of hours and days as I have done. I don't just talk the talk, I've walked the walk. I've dived that site back and forward in every possible condition, explored all the structures. If there was just one structure, I would be willing to listen to the skeptics. But we're dealing with 5 major structures here, arranged in a coherent, intelligent pattern, and I have no doubt whatsoever that the hand of man was at work there.
Okay, and I guess my last question is, there are a slew of alternative archaeology authors out there, and you guys all seem to, or not all, but a lot of people, review each other's works kindly. At least I see the blurbs on the back of the books that I read, and that influences my purchasing. And I'm wondering, do you think that you all mainly agree with each other on what's going on? And if there is an agreement, what would it take to actually change mainstream archaeology?
I think the agreement is primarily that there is a mystery that needs to be explored, and that the mainstream view of history may not be providing the whole answer. I think that's where the alternative researchers come in. We're offering a different way of interpreting history and prehistory, and I think that's healthy and good. Getting the mainstream to change its perspective has never been easy. Scientific revolutions don't happen easily. They happen in the teeth of opposition from those who are invested in the current paradigm. This is absolutely normal. You can trace it with all kinds of scientific revolutions over the last 1,000 years or so, and it's no different. There's no reason why it should be any different in the case of ancient history. Meanwhile, the criticism, the attacks, and the skepticism of mainstream archaeology are a good thing because they help those of us who are taking the alternative view to up our game and to make sure that we're not talking nonsense.
Mm-hmm. And is it the kind of thing where they secretly come to you, some of these archaeologists, and say, yeah, I'll never say this in public, but I really believe where you're coming from is true?
That has happened to me. Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Graham Hancock, thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time.
That's a pleasure. I've very much enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for having me on the show.
Great. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Dennis McKenna, and you're listening to Jeff and Jeremy on Paratopia.
Jeff, yes.
Yes, Jeremy.
Jeff, nice to see you again, old buddy. Nice to hear your voice.
Same to you. We haven't spoken since the last show.
Is that right? Is that right? We haven't spoken since the last show.
I can't stand the sight of you.
Graham Hancock.
Yeah.
What did we talk about again?
Has been a while, hasn't it?
It's what, a week?
Yes, it's been a week, a little over a week. So
to jog my memory.
I don't remember exactly.
Don't know what we're talking about. Thank you and good night.
Now, I'll say this. You got to admire a guy who can, do DMT and then drink ayahuasca and all that stuff in the same night.
Right, yeah.
Mushrooms? Well, I'll have some of those. When I come down off these, have the DMT ready.
Yeah.
What? Damn. I kind of expected to hear a lot of the I don't know, the McKenna-esque type of stuff from him. And I really didn't. I mean, you heard some of the same aspects of his experiences with this stuff, but you didn't hear much about machine elves or, incessant babbling. I think what I did find interesting, and I'm not sure if it actually made it onto the show, but because we did call him back after the show off the record, more or less.
Right.
And I'm fairly sure it got into the show where he was talking about one ayahuasca experience where he saw some sort of healing going on with him. And there were what he called two magicians walking around him doing the most amazing hand movements.
Right.
I thought, amazing hand movements. Jeremy?
Yeah, well, that's where I come in.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that was very interesting, but, I mean, it seems consistent to me with what McKenna has said. What was the guy we had? I can't remember his name. Goodnight Moon.
Brandon
yes,
B?
Yes. Some of what he had to say about seeing the jungle being the strongest component of the ayahuasca experience is experiencing the jungle and all that entails.
I wonder if he'd be thrilled that you remember him as the Goodnight Moon guy.
Well, if you could loop that, we could cure insomnia, like, without a doubt. He's so calming.
Very true.
So,
well, when you say he didn't sound as McKenna-esque as you expected, or didn't talk about the same things, is it because they did different things? I mean, was McKenna more of a mushroom man than an ayahuasca man, or more of a something else kind of guy?
Well, I mean, I think that I think he was way in love with the psilocybin experience as opposed to the ayahuasca. Although he spoke a lot about ayahuasca in that. I think what McKenna. I mean, there's a story that Terrence tells about ayahuasca and having some of it in his refrigerator, in the back of his refrigerator for like a year. And he says, a friend of mine came over and we wanted to do this and I had some, so I took it out and I couldn't remember if the shaman had told me, don't shake it when you take it out of the refrigerator or shake it when you take it out of the refrigerator. And he said that, basically he said, so I just figured I'd be safe and shake it. Which decidedly must not have been a good idea, he said, because I used to play a song that on just about every other psychedelic experience I'd found this particular brand of music rather inspiring or somewhat interesting. But on this shaken up, stored for a year back of the refrigerator ayahuasca, he said the most prevalent tone in this entire conversation with the experience was to survive the song. So clearly it had a different effect on him, but I do think he was more the mushroom. I think the conversations he had with that entity were a lot more prevalent in his stuff.
Mm-hmm. I find it interesting that he talks about the ayahuasca spirit being a female, embodied as a snake. And the Kogi speak about, spirit in terms of a female, as do, I believe, the Lakota, in terms of Mother Earth and that sort of stuff. Strieber's alien on the cover of Communion is female. The only voice I've ever heard in an abduction scenario or that I Am Enlightenment experience is a disembodied female voice.
Yeah.
What do we make of all this, especially in the face of patriarchal Christianity, which is what we were raised in? I mean, certainly not the indigenous people, but Strieber and I, at least, and Graham Hancock.
Yeah. Well, I think the repetitive being for me is always a woman who is always the one that's there. If they're playing good cop, bad cop. Yeah, I said that before with the experience that Lisa and I had up in up in the country, that the one that said, "Do you want to hold my hand?" was kind of a familiar one, and it always seems to be a she. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. It's just another one of the consistencies that seems to pop up, for everybody. in that. But I have to say, with the mushroom, I felt that to be decidedly feminine to a certain degree. I felt that a number of times during that. So I don't know. The snake thing, the snake wrapping around him and putting its huge head up on his shoulder and its eye staring into his, that'd have freaked me right the hell out. I'd have been done, yeah. I mean, clearly it's a different headspace than normal consciousness. So I guess you're willing to, I don't know, put up with a little bit more if it seems friendly. My thought would be, is it going to squeeze me to death? Is that what's going to happen here?
Well, see, I don't think that you do think that when you're there. I think,
now, I'm
normal
sure
thought goes
not.
out the window. Yeah. Normal concerns,
yeah.
let's say, aren't even concerns.
Right.
In Magic Land.
But I think his discussion at the X conference, if you can go back to that, is the aspect of his discovery of saying that we didn't become interesting as a species until basically we had discovered, some of these compounds that effectively launched us into more creativity, language, mathematics, able to extrapolate, large theories, complex theories, art, music, these kind of things. And, I got to say, in that aspect of it, I completely agree with him.
All right. Well, I mean, maybe. I'll put it out there as a maybe. The thing that makes me hesitate is that just with my own experience of not doing drugs, I'm doing things, this here body's doing stuff that looks like informed motions, looks like things I've seen, whirling dervish twirls, Tai Chi, yoga, certainly. All sorts of stuff that looks to be learned. Now, if we were way back when, who knows what was going on in our heads? Maybe we had more DMT running around in our brains. Maybe there was more natural access to either other consciousnesses. I just made a plural of that. Or just this, whatever this layer of information is that we can somehow tap into, whatever that ultimately ends up being. We could have just had more access to that, or just people in my situation or a similar situation where it just sort of comes to them in some idiot savant sort of way.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, when you look at, I found it especially interesting, the cave art part of it. When you're looking at stuff that's before a certain time, it just seems to be, like he presented, it just seems to be a complete departure from normal stick figure throwing a spear at a stick figure ox or a stick figure giraffe or whatever. When you look at these ones from the Chauvet, I think it was caves, they are extraordinarily abstract looking. There are the mythical beings of the kind of coupling of the head of a bull and the body of a man, and the woman with the head of a leopard or a lion, and that kind of those coupling of those two things is like really prevalent. And there was also I think it was a stag, and this stag had this immense antler rack that was just far beyond normalcy. This was not something that they saw. This is something that it was just this abstract concept they were able to put forth. So, whether they got there with a psychedelic compound, or whether they got there through starvation, or there's a whole lot of ways to get out of your mind.
Well, what about the possibility? I guess what I'm trying to get at maybe is that's sort of what they evolved away from, that they were embedded in this larger reality, and the more they focused on something, art, culture, whatever those beginning initial phases of society and symbolic thinking were, once they started sort of concentrating on those, and maybe it was only simply because they were new things to do, maybe that was like the original origin, was like, here's this new faculty in the brain to be able to do these things, that maybe they slowly drag themselves out of that larger picture that, say cats and dogs are still in, when you see them like looking around at stuff and you don't know what they're looking at. Maybe that's right. The way we were back then, just stepping out of the animal and into the human.
Well, I would go along with that if it weren't for the fact that, when you're talking about I don't know, extraordinarily primitive peoples, that I think they'd have bigger things to worry about than sitting around in the dark trying to think of things. They'd be thinking of what am I going to eat tomorrow? I've got to get to sleep. How am I going to stay warm?
I don't know.
I don't know.
This novel thing, this new thing. I mean, we've got bigger things to worry about, and we don't do any of them.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Well, that's because we're occupied by a whole lot more than ancient man. you know?
But if ancient man steps out of instinct's grip and can suddenly think symbolically and create these things and attribute meaning to them and create architecture and things like that, I mean, whoa! Now you've got this whole new palette to play with.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the ultimate shiny object up until the TV.
I would have to say, well, what facilitated that? I mean, what? You know, just what would have sparked that? What would have kicked that off?
That I don't know, but the thing that separates us, right, from animals is the larger frontal lobe. Isn't that the thing that we have? Mm-hmm. So just taking shrooms or some hallucinogen wouldn't have sparked a larger frontal lobe.
Well, there is a development of, and McKenna talks about this in one of his lectures, is that in the course of a certain amount of time, the human brain or the human capacity to think expanded exponentially within a very short period of time. And so far as McKenna knew at the time, and I don't know how long ago the lecture was, anthropologists, they had no idea why this happened, which was essentially what he was saying was that, you know, when man found mushroom or man found any psychedelic compound whatsoever that was raw within nature, is when alphabets and art and music and all of these things seem to have come forth out of that mind expanding experience. You know, so I don't know that any of this is factual. I mean, I don't even think that they're saying 100% that this is what it is.
I mean, I'm not sold on what I'm saying either. I think it could very well go exactly as Graham Hancock is suggesting, but I just I don't see any evidence that a hallucinogen would physically, I mean, it would expand your mind, but it wouldn't expand your brain. So the brain expansion was already there, and we're assuming that the mind expansion didn't immediately go with that brain expansion. It was waiting for some hallucinogen to flip a switch.
Well, I mean, again, we don't know the physiological development of early man over the course of, say, I don't know, 500, 1,000 years or what have you. What is the genetic response to no psychedelic compound and all of a sudden one introduced into the mix, and then from there, where does it go? Does it actually do something to the brain that is continuing to do that in time when you're talking about a human being that is completely untouched by any of this stuff? You know, once you introduce that compound into society and it becomes frequently used, what does that do then to the reproductive,
But then you have to ask the
offspring
across the board, don't you?
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, why just us?
Well, I mean, frontal lobe. I mean,
I thought what you were getting at was that maybe
I am reducing it to physicality.
Well, I thought you were saying that perhaps the intake of this stuff produced the frontal lobe.
No, I'm saying over the course of time, you have to wonder if it didn't have some kind of effect on the brain as a whole in the development of early man from one point to another. Did it have something to do with the capacity of thought and the capacity of the brain in certain ways? Yeah, I don't know. I definitely think more study needs to be done to find out, when did these people actually find a compound like that and then learn to survive or use it?
Well, I think this riddle is easy because I saw on National Geographic, this feral boy who is now a feral man, who was discovered, who was raised by monkeys and found, and so now he's an adult, but he's got the brain capacity of a kindergartner. Let's just give him some acid and see what happens.
That'd be cool.
I mean, really?
You want to give him a ring and
yeah,
we could try and score him some shrooms?
When we're done here, I'll Skype him.
Yeah.
I Skype all the kindergartners.
Right. Oh, Jesus.
Sorry.
There it is. I mean, I don't know. It's a really interesting theory, and And actually, when Graham shows some of these cave paintings, and he shows also that at a certain point in time, this is where we start seeing very, very strange looking beings being introduced into all sorts of cave art, and many of them, little bodies, humongous heads, And I'm not one of those guys who will normally say, "Oh my God, look at that! That's got to be an alien. That's got to be something." I think 99.9% of all of the stuff that people put forth in biblical artwork, I think, to my satisfaction, has been more than explained as completely mundane things,
right.
or abstract concepts of. I think the most popular one is that. Virgin Mary and baby Jesus, and you've got the big scene out behind him. There's a guy on a little outcropping or a point of land over the water, and he's got his hand up to his eyes, and he's looking at this what looks like a goddamn flying saucer right there in the air with gold around it and all this kind of, and apparently that's his hat.
Right.
He's not looking. He's thrown his hat, and this was something that apparently the Pope of the time had done a lot of, and so this was included in the painting. Everybody looks at that and goes, flying saucer. But I have to say that some of these cave paintings are very strange. You had mentioned an experience that you had, I think, when your granddad passed away, that, his face began to take on in the state that you were in, his face began to take on this very strange appearance that the longer you looked, the more intense it got. And it seemed to reflect this cave painting that you see. I believe the one you were referring to was the one with a lot of white faces with these deep set dark eyes that were rather large and ovalisk. And I just saw that on TV the other day and hearkened back to seeing the one that was crawling out of the fractal that night. That is that shape, that slant, and that smooth oval shape of that eye. That's pretty much what I saw. So all these things seem to come up in the historical record on cave art at about this time. And again, where is this coming from? Is this coming from purely some sort of external source that all of a sudden is just putting its finger into the well of humanity? Or did somebody, discover the mushroom because they were starving to death? Were they starving to death and that set them off on this alternate state of consciousness? Who the hell is to say? We don't know. But I think it's definitely a fascinating concept that, when did we really become interesting? When did we come apart from the rest of the animals on the planet? And I think that McKenna, I think Graham, they both make pretty strong case that, the psychedelics are what kind of, set that spark off, and we went from there.
So what do you make of this? And I guess, I wish I'd thought of this when we were interviewing him. But so he's in the ayahuasca world. He says he takes ayahuasca and suddenly he's immersed in this jungle setting, and that's where he usually sees the snake woman or the snake spirit. And but one fine time, or maybe it was two, but at least the once, he had the abduction experience.
Yeah,
that seemed to sort of rip through that vision in some way and be kind of scary, and he sort of called it off. Hey, why didn't the spirit queen of that realm come to his aid or interact with that vision or anything like that? I mean, isn't that interesting?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think that the way that he described that as a big funnel or column of light that seemed to be coming out of something that was in the air, above him. I mean, and that's not by any stretch anything unusual. I mean, there is a guy who has lived in the Amazon all his life, and he is an ayahuasca artist, and he has drawn things that can only be some form of what we would call a flying saucer or a craft of some sort, some of them very weird looking. Why wouldn't she come to his aid at that point? I don't know. I mean, is that something that comes and goes, or is that something you only feel on the onset and from there you're on your own? I don't know. I found it interesting that he could call it off at all.
Well, call it off by opening his eyes, by
right,
in the way that you would call off a shroom vision.
Yeah, yeah.
Which makes it sound like, to say it out loud like that makes it sound like this is all just hallucinatory, just a dream or something like that. But it really does not feel that way when you're immersed in it. It feels like virtual reality. I mean, it feels like you are the scene that you're looking at, that you're immersed in.
go back to the whole definition of what's a hallucination. What does that mean? I mean that, and then that goes.
Well, I mean, there are certainly. All right. Well, let's put it this way: there are rigid physical boundaries here, and there are sensible responses to things here. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know what responses are like in hallucination world. Certainly there are no physical boundaries in the way that we have, but it seems that if something were genuinely invading some other spirit's place and it didn't want it there, or it was threatened by it or something, there would have been some sense of that. There would have been some retaliation or some inviting in or something other than what you could just construe as a nightmare just took over a dream.
Right. Well, I mean, what you have to keep in mind is exactly what he said, and I can sort of relate in the very slim amount of experience that I had was that within the experience there is joy, there is a benign presence to it all, but that there are also things in there that seem inherently bad or evil or dark or what have you.
But does it not connect with each other? I mean, do you get the sense?
I mean, apparently not.
From listening to McKenna, does he ever talk about them knowing about each other when they happen, or happening at the same time, or one chasing off the other, or anything like that?
I've never heard. I mean, the only thing that I can say about McKenna was, as far as what he said about DMT, and this was in a very hard to listen to piece of audio because the quality was horrible, but he spoke about DMT and he said, I don't know anyone who's done it as much as I have. And I wish more. This is an area that we really need to get more consensus on. But as I went back to that place and became familiar, I mean, it took him. I can't tell you how many times, but he said a lot of experiment with DMT where before he could even get a handle on what was going on, and after so many times in that place, he could finally sort of build the story that you often hear of the large vaulted ceiling room that's white. The most recent lecture that I've heard him talk about the DMT experience on, I heard something new that I'd never heard him say before. I mean, we're all familiar, I think, with the white round room, or at least I definitely am when it comes to certain experiences. But one thing that he mentions is that there's the definite feeling that it's underground, which I thought was which I'd never heard him mention before. But he said of the DMT elves, the machine elves, that he tykes, as he called them, that the more that he went back, the more he realized that they could have a fearsome way about them. In other words, they when he first showed up into that place, as he calls it, the overall feeling is, hurrah, you're here, welcome. Why did you stay away so long? And then he said there's a moment before they're on him, meaning there's a moment before they're and they're singing these things into existence right in front of him and hold it here. Look at this one. Look at this one. Look at that one. And he says at that point they begin to say, now you do it. And it's hysterical to hear him talk about this because he says, when I first realized what was going on, I just said, I just want to go back to New York, and they're like, no, forget later for that, do this. And they begin chanting, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, to the point where he said, I almost became afraid of them because they seemed remarkably incessant that I do this. And I was just unsure whether I could. In that space, you can do it, he discovered. But later on, as he became more and more familiar with these tykes, he said, I wouldn't turn my back on them because they began to take on almost a personality of like the used car salesman, feeling to it. It had a very slick, hey, snappy. And that, I mean, again, that goes all the way back to when we talked to Reagan Lee. And she was talking about the little furry beings around her bed. She wouldn't turn her back on them, but they were cute and they seemed chatty and funny. But there was something about them that wasn't quite right. And I think the whole of the experience can have that that flavor to it where it has many masks. It can put on many different faces, and it can be that friendly, calming goddess of ayahuasca, or it can be different things. I think that's the point. And I always go back to what you hear from some people in the psychedelic community is that, well, that wasn't my experience. What Terrence describes definitely wasn't anything I've seen. And I go back again to dose, based on weight, based on all of that. And also set and setting. I'm sure all of that figures into it as well. But dose. What is the dose? What is that threshold experience? What is it? What is the amount that you have to get past and have the courage to get past to get to that experience with DMT or any drug? I think it's like the tuning of a radio. You can nail right into, Rock 101, or you could be just askew left or right. And what do you get when you go askew left or right? I don't know. So I think it's dependent on dose. I think it's dependent on setting. And I think this thing wears many faces. And I think that what one man might see as the goddess and experience that might later transmorgify into, the alien experience. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really don't know. The two meeting, I think the two are the same thing. You can hear the funny little chatty, friendly, hurrah, glad to see you DMT elves, or you can see the fact that they're actually little slimy car salesmen who are insisting that you do something, and I wouldn't turn my back on them. I found that to be really kind of strange. And I guess the more that you do it, the more comfortable or you get your legs, so to speak, in that place. And I guess maybe the more you're able to bring back, or, the more you're able to remember. I don't know. Because ayahuasca is not something that I would particularly want to do. I think Brandon had huge balls to go down into a jungle with people we didn't know and drink that stuff and experience that. I mean, I think that takes guts like I know I ain't got. So, I mean, who knows? Who knows where all that comes from or goes to? It may all be the same thing.
All right, the Jeff. So what's been going on in your world these last few weeks?
I've been hunting ghosts.
Yes. How's that going for you?
Well, I mean, we could say at this point, even though this is our first show of the new season, that we've season debut here.
That's right.
That a lot has happened since we were last with you all. Number one being that we lost Mac Tonys. There's something which was horrifyingly shocking and sudden and out of nowhere. Henceforth, why we've dedicated this episode to Mac. I think he would have really enjoyed this one. I mean, that's just completely... We got that news just as we were going to Gettysburg to the Nesbitt house to stay overnight. And, man, I couldn't get him out of my head like all weekend. It was just... for some reason, my mind just wouldn't accept that had happened to him. So, I mean... That's a huge loss as far as I'm concerned. And but then we went to the Nesbitt house, and that'll be coming up on next episode after this. I mean, right after this, we'll be doing that, I suppose.
Yeah, if we get our act together.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a lot of editing. It might end up being a two-parter.
No, I don't think it will be, because what evidence we did get, I think that we're going to be able to play on a radio show, I think is going to be fairly easy for me to snip out and send you. And then you'll just drop that in when I go and listen to this. So we'll be able to do that. But I have to say, I mean, there wasn't a ton that we got in the Audible stuff. I think there was a hell of a lot of personal experiences with that. So I don't want anybody to be disappointed in what we got, but there's a hell of a lot to talk about when it regards to that place. Now, I have to say that since we've come back from there, I think I had said on a previous show, or I think when Mark was on with us, I said that I was finding that area of study of the paranormal a hell of a lot more interesting than the UFO stuff is at the time. because there's something to me really appealing about the aspect of being able to go to a place that is supposedly active and being able to possibly capture something there within a night or even in the daytime. I find the UFO stuff a lot more fleeting and elusive than this. But I have been up to Gettysburg since then. I went back this past weekend and the weekend before, and it's interesting in the aspect of I'm seeing the same type of progression that you would see within a ufological investigation where, what's the old adage is shit doesn't stink till you stir it. And I see that within the ghost stuff. I definitely see that what EVPs I started out by just toying around here at the house with, which were very hard to hear, and some of which nobody could make out, nobody could really even hear to a certain degree. They were so faint. And, going up to the Nesbitt place, we got some EVP that, again, aren't fantastic, but the fact that we were sitting alone in an absolutely deathly silent house, to hear anything is interesting. Anything that sounds like a voice. And we did get that. And one I have to say is a little bit unnerving in how clear it is. But I've since been back to Triangle Field and Devil's Den and all of these places that are steeped with haunting stories. And I got an EVP that I didn't even have to raise the audio level to hear. There's this progression of, oh, more of that? Sure, here it is. Is that what you're after? More? Okay, here's more. When you're actively seeking these things out, it seems that the level of the quality, the volume, the clarity seems to get deeper and deeper and bigger. As you put your finger into the pie, there's more and more cherries to be popped out. So I'm completely fascinated with it right now. And I'm personally, like I told you in an email, I'm steering away from the UFO stuff lately because it's retarded. I think the whole field is insane. Well, I mean, really, it's crazy. And I don't know really that I care to do anything actively in it anymore for the simple aspect of, do I really, I guess already my name is associated with it, but do I want to continue to associate my name with it as insane as it's getting? I don't really think I do.
Well,
I'm fairly disgusted.
What do you think is more insane now than ever? I mean, hasn't it always pretty much?
Well, it's always had the fringe element to it. It's always had that, but I think again we can go back to Maggie Jackson with the advent of the internet and the effort, the whole notion of anybody being able to have their say or anybody being able to have a platform instantly on the internet. I think that the fringe element and the lack of critical thought in this is so pervasive right now that it is overshadowing most of the people who think about this in a critical way. And the more I look, the more, the less I see people out there who are critical.
Let me ask you, do you think that's a function of the fact that the people who appeared to be critical were nuts and bolts people, and since that has proven pretty much to not be the case, then you're stuck with nothing. I mean, if you only have one coherent philosophy and that philosophy ends up to be invalid, then it's pretty much you've got lunacy and you've got people who are well-intentioned but wrong, and that's what you're.
I think there's definitely been people in this for years that have steered away from the nuts. Jacques Vallée steered away from the nuts and bolts. And look at the crap that he got. Sure, oh, there it is. No.
In-jokes, people.
There's been that thread that's continuously gone through this. That it is bigger. That it is.
There's always been that thread, but the vast majority of it was nuts and bolts, which is appealing, in which we fell for at least once in our lives.
Sure.
So what I'm saying is, if that's like, if you take a Stanton Friedman, who is someone who is well spoken and well thought out, but just wrong. You know, if he wasn't just wrong, say 5-10 years ago, and now it's pretty much conclusive almost that he is just wrong, then you're stuck with people who, like him, were, you know, great thinkers of their time, but now are sort of irrelevant, like Newtonian physics. It's irrelevant.
Well, I'd say irrelevant by whose standards, though? Where are you applying that benchmark?
That there's not a nuts and bolts thing going on. That there's no giant conspiracy with the government that's panning out.
See, I think when you step back and take a larger look at the public, the interested UFO public in this, that we're in the minority in that, you know. I mean, I honestly, earnestly believe that. I mean, I've had enough interactions with the masses, you know, at abovetopsecret.com or any place that you want to go on the net. And the notion of taking this out of the nuts and bolts field to most people is absolute heresy. It still is.
Yeah, but the point is, like, the nuts and bolts field, because the nuts and bolts field has not produced the nuts and bolts answers that it promises,
right?
It's turned into lunacy. I mean, in spite of truth, there's just lies and crazy, and so that's what's happened. It's not as though I don't know. I'm just wondering: is it as though like the internet came along and so that means more morons can just come along and say whatever they want, or is it that we're living in the failure of the nuts and bolts theory gone awry? Whether most people believe that that's true still or whatever is irrelevant, because they're still clinging to it, but it's making them neurotic and believing things like Obama's gonna, you know, disclose something in a month.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I keep hearing sane people say this to me, and it's like, I don't know.
I know where you're going. I mean, again, the lunacy doesn't exclude the nuts and bolts. That's a big problem for the nuts and bolts people, is that, you know, you've got people like Greer out there who are saying that, you know, they can vector in these things and they're structured objects, they're structured craft of some sort. You know, that speaks to nuts and bolts to me as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. You know, so all of these people are latching onto that. And the government conspiracy thing is more alive and kicking. You know, all of that conspiracy stuff has taken a quantum leap from 10 years ago. I mean, it is so out there now that, you know, you listen to somebody talk about this, you're like, I need to go get, I got to go to the bathroom. I mean, you're just trying to find an excuse to get out of the conversation.
See, I find that hard to believe, because 10 years ago or so, you had the X-Files, which was huge.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that,
believe
then
me,
it would have been rampant. It would have been like, oh my God, you know, between that and Gray's eat strawberry ice cream from Falcon or Condor or whoever.
Yeah, but nowadays, look what you've got nowadays. You've got people out there claiming clandestine meetings with people that they couldn't possibly have clandestine. I mean, it's taken a quantum leap into the stupid, is what I'm saying. not that it's not there.
It has taken a quantum leap into the stupid, but I don't think the masses are paying attention to any of it. Whereas the X-Files, they certainly were.
I would encourage you to go to abovetopsecret.com and say that after an hour spent there. I mean, no, I think very much people are still extraordinarily hooked on the government knows, goddammit, and we want to know, and they must tell us because they must tell us because we deserve it. That is so prevalent and thick right now. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think, again, the circles that we hang in, the people that we wanted to talk with 10 years ago, 20 years ago would have been the fringe. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, there's fringe and there's just dumb. Let's break it into that category. There's the stupid.
I guess this is what I'm saying. You know? All of ufology at this point is, according, as far as the mainstream is concerned, is the fringe, is it not? I mean, it hasn't caught on the way ghost hunting has, or any of that sort of stuff. Yes, Above Top Secret has 1 million people, but if there are, 250 million people out there, that's not a lot.
Yeah, and that's not to say that there aren't critically thinking people at Above Top Secret. There definitely is. But I see the majority of that populace over there as being I don't know. They're how do you put this nicely? Well, you don't. They're a step back. I feel like they're a step backwards, and like you're still in the 1990s, late 1980s storyline here. You need to catch up to where things are going. And it's very hard when someone gets their answer of the government knows, they won't tell us. Well, that's why we don't know. That's not it.
I've got to say, you just reminded me on that note, since this is a new season, Jeff, allow me to be the first to burn a bridge, which is that Joe Montaldo, who hosts this podcast on UPRN,
probably not
105.3 New Orleans,
right?
Or not? Is really a giant fucking moron. I don't know how else to put that. He put up a Facebook thread about what is alien sex like? What is it? Why are aliens having sex with people? What is that like? And I thought I gave my typical, this is horseshit answer. And then followed up with, what I'm hoping is eloquent facts, such as, we don't know what we're even talking about, so what do you mean? And that, and that just goes ignored by him. And his next post later is about how we know for a fact that there are 9 species of greys. There's 9 types of gray aliens alone, let alone the other aliens. 9 types of gray aliens. Go ahead.
And they hang out in cemeteries.
Yeah, well, that was something he had said elsewhere, is that, that they hang out in cemeteries, waiting to collect the dead. I mean, it's just, it makes me want to pull my hair out. It really does. And I looked at that, and it's like, before, I remember saying, like, I don't mind being associated. Jeff's showing me that he's going bald. I don't mind being associated with schmucks, because it's like banking. It's like, what bank isn't evil? It's like you have no choice.
Right.
I mean, at some point, if you want to have some sort of distribution of this show, you're going to deal with people that you're not going to like in life, or you're not going to agree with philosophically, or whatever the case may be. And that's fine when it's quiet, but when I see it in my face, I gotta call it what it is, which is, he's a fucking moron. And he's not doing this field any favors. And he promotes shit. And on the one hand, I'd like to say, well, then we shouldn't be on his thing. But maybe we're the best thing on there, for all I know. Maybe we're the only hope that his network has. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know what the other shows are.
I don't know, but I've been thinking for the past X amount of weeks that maybe we ought to just bow out of the UPRN network family.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't think we're being broadcast there anyway. I think maybe the first X amount of episodes, yes, but after that, I don't think that he was coming on and getting the download links off the homepage. So we never got a single response on our message board whatsoever from anybody down there, or anybody who listened on that network or found us through that or anything else.
And he certainly hasn't chimed in with our making fun of the fact that we're not really on UPRN.
No, we haven't got anything from that.
So he's not paying attention, and he's a fucking idiot. So I think that you combine those two things, and it's time to go.
Yeah, I think we do well to. If we want to be on some network, which I don't see the point of being on anyway, but it'd be nice to try and hook up with the Black Vault Network or somebody like that, somebody with integrity, and that would be good. But I'm not chasing after that. That's here nor there. We got a damn huge audience for no longer than we've been around, and I'm happy about that. So thanks to everybody for coming back and listening. For the new season, we got a lot of stuff coming up too.
Yeah.
Some really good stuff.
Well, I should say that I went to the Harvard gathering of experiencers, and I don't know that I can really even talk about it. I thought I would be able to, but I will eventually. But some people were uncomfortable with having a large public role, although I think everyone seemed to want to get together and maybe do small invite-only workshop type stuff the way it was the weekend that I went. And there were some, non-experiencers at this thing. So some people are comfortable doing that. Some people want to come out in a big way and go on TV and say, look, this is real, blah, 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 whatever the message would be. But until they get that sorted out, I guess I will keep mum about it, except to say that at the end of this workshop, we did a little meditation, a group meditation. There, I would call it a moment of silence. It was really just, be quiet and breathe kind of thing. At the end of which, the person who had, asked that we do this, brought us out by saying, 3 coming back, 2 coming back, 1, you're present in the room, that sort of thing. And when she got to 2, the door started shaking fiercely, like the next thing would be if someone were pounding on it. It was, the door handle was rattling and the door was like that kind of ferocity. And I didn't have my eyes shut because I don't do group meditations.
So you were the little boy in church with your eyes open while everybody was bowing their heads, right?
Yeah. So the door was not locked. Nobody came into the room, The door didn't open. And it wasn't a door that was out front. It was a door that was in the building. So there was a receptionist. You would have to go beyond that area to come in. And then, it sounded like somebody had locked themselves out and was shaking to get in or something like that, but that just wasn't the case.
Well, he also said the door wasn't locked.
Well, yeah, that's why it wasn't the case,
right.
Outside of the fact that everyone was present and accounted for. So it was just, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there as the timing of that was really incredible, and the fact that it happened at all. I wish I just leaped out of my seat and ran across the room and opened that door, but
right.
But it was funny because my mom went with me, and she, I asked her, so what did you make of that? And she said, well, it was probably, it sounded like somebody had come into the room. And I told her I had my eyes open the whole time. There wasn't nobody coming into that room. I know that's what it sounded like. And so then she was like, huh, that is weird. So I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as like a do-do-do-do moment. But I do want to say that we're going to have a number of guests on. I made some good friends there, actually, and met, a whole bunch of people. And so some of them are going to come on the show. Some of them you have heard of, and some of them you have not. And their stories will amaze you. And I got to say, it was just really impressive and amazing to be in a room full of experiencers with the professional credentials these people have and the articulation that they have, to the point where I'm entertaining things that I otherwise wouldn't. Like a woman, for instance, who her job is she speaks with animals. And I think maybe she said specifically turtles, but animals. She speaks to animals. Like, I would never listen to this in a million years, except that she didn't not make sense to me, And then somebody did a presentation, the physicist who's not an experiencer, basically running down a list, and we'll have him on the show, running down the list from abductions to channeling to talking to animals to ghost hunting, all of this stuff. He runs down the list and he says, the skeptical response to that is, oh, yeah, that's just the abduction people. Oh, yeah, that's just the ghost people. Oh, yeah, that's just the people who speak to animal spirits. And you run down this list and you realize that the list is pretty damn long to just keep disregarding people. To just keep saying, oh, that's those people. It's a list of those people. And then he goes on to basically illustrate through physics how all of this stuff is possible. And so, like I said, we'll have him on the show, and he can flesh this out for us, and you will learn some amazing things. I know I did. So, I don't know. It was just, I've been in experiencer situations. I've been to one sort of group meeting after a conference, and of course the X-conference stuff as well. And I'm always uncomfortable. I'm always, the people who claim to be experiencers I don't necessarily believe, or, I think they're delusional or not deep or something. Their response to it seems off somehow. And these people, it was completely different, So I was really glad I went. If they do another thing, which they're going to soon, I'll go again. And, but I don't know if it just stays if it just stays like group meetings, then I won't go after that, because I have no want for group therapy or talking about my stuff or whatever. Mm-hmm. So only if something evolves out of this would I go a third time, but I would definitely go again, and I would hope that you could make it. You couldn't make it this time, but I hope you could make it.
Right. Oh, yeah, I'll definitely. I was very sorry that I couldn't make it. But that was literally the weekend after Gettysburg, and at some point you have to do something with your house that your wife's been wanting you to do for a while, and so I had to do that. Right. But I don't know. I hope you won't be disappointed when I say this, that I don't care how much physics are applied. I will not put forth any effort for talking to animals. I'm sorry, or channeling. There's just not a way I can fit that into my box for things. I can fit a lot of things in there, but I don't know.
You know what it was? It was like I was sitting there, I was listening to it, and I'm like, and of course my BS meter goes on immediately because
sure.
I just can't hear this stuff. And then I'm thinking, well, what's going on with me? Is that any different than channeling? I mean, the difference is that I don't speak. You know? So, I mean, I gotta leave some of this crap open, and so... And then I guess I get into the prejudice of, well, geez, if these people were invited here by these other people who seem trustworthy and blah, 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 then there's got to be a reason. There must be something trustworthy about them. So, I don't know. I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt until proven wrong, I guess.
Right. I don't know. That's just, I mean, the fact that you don't speak, I think, says a lot. You don't speak.
Yeah.
You're not saying things and putting information out there like fourth density reptilians and stuff like that. So that's not part of your repertoire. I mean,
not yet.
If it is, this show is over. So, I don't know. That's just something I we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but I won't go quietly into that night. I can assure you. But
and I'm not saying it was all hunky dory. I did have some problems with some of the stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Nothing major, but just my own peccadillos, I guess. But
when
I can talk about it, I'll talk about it.
Sure. Well, and the people coming on will, I'm sure, bring it up in one way or another. So,
I should say this though, because this is also always creepy when this happens. One of the people there, was Jim Weiner. Man, do I love saying that name. Jim Weiner. Who
Adolescence.
You may remember as one of the twins from the Allagash abductions. Mm-hmm. And pretty much he saw me and he just sort of like stalked across the room and was like, I know you from somewhere. Were you at the Langley conference or Laughlin conference, whatever it is? Like, no. And then we just had to keep going through this. No, I know you. I know. And I'm like, well, I write for UFO Magazine. Maybe you've seen my picture there. He's like, no, I don't read UFO Magazine. He's like, no, I've met you. I know you from somewhere. And then this woman comes across the other way. And she's like, yeah, I do too. She's like, I knew you from somewhere. I'm like, I got nothing. I've never met either of you. I've never been to any conferences. I don't know. And to have it be the Allagash guy is like...
You were one of the guys naked on the bench across the room, staring blankly. And let me say this, when we first met at the X conference, I think that, and since that point, since that initial meeting, this really hasn't crossed my mind again. But I'm like, I first meet this guy and I go, very young Jim Belushi here. This is what I say.
That could be it.
But
here's the weird mindfuck thing, and I didn't tell Jim this because it's just so incomprehensible that I feel like I had to have been making it up. But when we went to dinner afterwards, and then I had this what appeared to be I had a deja vu moment, except I knew what the deja vu moment was, and it was that I had a dream that he asked me, did we meet at the Laughlin conference like a couple of years ago? He or his brother or one of those guys, because my friend Harold Egeln, who we've had on the show, was trying to get one of them to come do the Culture of Contact conference.
Ah, okay.
And so I seem to remember a couple of years ago when we were trying to get them to do the Culture of Contact conference, having a dream about one of them just because I'd heard their name or whatever. And then that was the dream. Was this scenario happening? Was that dream? But then I asked him if he knew Harold Egeln, and he said no. So I'm thinking that's just, I don't know what that is.
Isn't that the weirdest thing when you have the deja vu and you remember where the deja vu came from?
Yeah, and it was this very moment. And it was like, bleh.
There's a good question for our listeners. Deja vu. I'm curious if, and I'll ask you this too, because I don't think we've ever talked about this. And I would really like to have somebody on about deja vu. When I have deja vu, it is palpable. It is not just I feel like I've been here before. It's like, it's almost choking when I get it. It is so, I think I mentioned to you about the whole notion of me trying to meditate and then becoming aware of I give up, I don't care, I'm never going to get it. That rushy type feeling. That's what deja vu is for me. It is, something that kind of kicks me squarely in the teeth when I get it. And it stops me in my tracks when it happens. And then everybody looks at me funny. Yeah. I'm curious how many people out there who are experiencers or not experiencers have that very thick, I remember when I dreamed this deja vu type of experience, because I don't think most people do. I mean, I've talked to Lisa, I don't know, dozens of times about this, and she says, no, mine's never really that strong. It's just a very subtle feeling, but still a little strange. It's never that, bam type of feeling that's so strong. Mine is unbelievably strong. I mean, it's stopping your tracks strong. So for you, what is that? Is it subtle for you, or is it?
No, sometimes it's subtle, but
palpable?
Sometimes it's palpable and it's on the tip of my tongue and it's annoying. It's like, I know where that is. But, and then sometimes like this, I mean, this isn't the only time, I remember where I know that I got that deja vu from, I remember what the scenario is. Yeah. And, that's satisfying and weird at the same time. Except sometimes I'll have deja vu and I'll have like triple or quadruple deja vu. And I'll be like, what?
Yes.
I'm like, what? And I'll have like the cloud or the flavor of those memories, but not the fully fleshed out, you know what I mean? Like enough of
where does that come
hint of
from?
what they are to realize that, I really did have this 3 or 4 times, but not enough to say when. I don't know.
Yes.
It kills me.
And let's not forget that the DMT elves say as you leave that place, deja vu, deja vu. That's what they say. I mean, So,
but isn't there a scientific answer for deja vu? Like, didn't they discover where it is in the brain or something like that?
There's a scientific answer for everything. Right. We're insane. Come on.
No. The scientific answer is always only the biological correlate to the actual thing that's going on. That is what I've discovered.
So,
mistaken as the full answer.
Whatever. Dismissive.
Thanks, Generation X. That was very...
Yes.
That was very un-40-something of you.
Right. So anyway, so you did that, and I've been doing Gettysburg, and I'm going back again Saturday because I'm hooked. What can I say?
Are you sure you're not just avoiding the fact that, A, you could very easily be doing this in your own home, and B, you've got a dude in a cloth that comes and visits you, and which should, by all rights, be more fascinating than standing out in a field with a recorder.
But it's not. Yeah, but it's not. What am I gonna show from that? I mean, I got nothing from that. I mean, the outside person out there can look at that and go, "Yeah, he's just making that up." I mean, I'm not, but it's certainly easy to dismiss. Whereas,
but for your own personal, I'm saying for your own personal,
for my own personal stuff.
journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's sure, it's more interesting, but it's so freaking sporadic and sudden that I mean, here lately at least, that before you even know what's going on or what conversation is happening, it's already over.
Well, you're saying that driving, what is it, 45 minutes, an hour out of your way to a field is not A, out of your way, and B, also a sporadic thing? It's not like you're having conversations with ghosts out there.
I need to get out more. I need to get out more. Leave me alone.
I'm saying you call this guy in, you do your best to call this guy in, and ask him,
call this guy in,
tell him something that you can't know. Give him the DMT test. What can't I know? And if he goes, you think this is real? Then screw it. You go back out into the field with a recorder.
See, we've gone down that route before, and I got whipped in my sleep. I'm not really up for that anymore. I mean,
yeah, but you got whipped for talking about it.
Right. That's what we do here.
Oh, well, you don't have to talk about it. You can just get the information.
That does me a lot of good. Yeah, that's great. I've already
I'll
got
talk about it.
I've already got stuff, that is not going to be discussed. So it's, and it's nothing earth shattering, but it's earth shattering for me, and I have to say, and I think I thought I was okay talking last time, but I'll say it anyway. There hasn't been a lengthy, encounter like that since that last time. So, I mean, it's been, weird in one aspect that I see the figure of this person in other places, driving down the road, on the street corner, just for a glimpse or two, a little longer than, I just imagined that, or I misidentified that, a little bit longer than that, but still not. And it's not like I'm approached or I'm looked at, or it's just there, and boom, then it's not there. And since then, my mother told me, we went to see Paranormal Activity.
Oh yes.
And if you haven't seen Paranormal Activity, I highly encourage you not to go. But I picked her up and we went because my wife won't go see scary movies with me. So Mom went with me. She enjoys them. And we got back to the house and I was dropping her off and she was sitting in the car with me. And I said, look, there's been a little bit more with this. I told her everything from the initial experience on. And we got out of the car. I told her about it, and of course she is she's a religious woman. So she kind of, again, that's her filter. That's where she views paranormal activities or contact with anything is going to be viewed through her spiritual goggles in that sense. So, she sounded like Nora. You sure this isn't angels? You sure this isn't an angel?
Your mom is George Nori? Are you serious?
No. I looked over and for a second her hair was jet black like a Muppet with a mustache. No, that's just her way of kind of enveloping the whole experience. And I said, no, Mom, it's not that. It's something else. It's it's outside of that envelope. I don't ascribe to that envelope that well, so I know I don't feel it's that. And then when we got out of the car and we were walking towards the house, she goes, I had a very strange experience the other night leaving your house. And I said, well, what? She said, your dad and I were going down the road from your place, and I looked over, and there's this person standing there wearing this black sheet. And he's walking beside the road. And as we got closer, he just completely faded away. And I asked your dad, did you see that? And he said, no. So she saw the same thing as I've been seeing, which is exactly that. You see someone, you see that they're covered head to toe in something black. It's flowing, it's blowing. You look away for a second or you blink and it's not there anymore. So now at least Mom has seen something of this. If only that little snippet that's fine by me, because I think that the purpose of her seeing him was to tell me that, because I've had the thought as of late, and I'll say this on the air, I don't really care. There's a part of me that has pondered this to the 9th degree and has come away by saying that in some way I feel that this guy, I don't know how to say it other than to say it outright and let the chips fall where they are, is to say that he's not in my head. He's not a product of imagination or fantasy or lunacy, but there is a part of him that seems to be me. I'm not sure exactly how I can put my finger on that or describe it any better, but there seems to be a certain level of familiarity about it, and it's the only thing I can ascribe the familiarity to, is that in some part of this experience is that he is me, or he is part of me, or something like that. But it's definitely manifested. I've touched, this. I've held it in my hands. I've actually put material in my hands that he's wearing and said, this is real. I am touching it. I can feel it. Tactile. The whole thing it's all there. And it goes back to, let's go full circle with the Graham Hancock thing. In the interview he discussed where you're confronted with things with ayahuasca that you can't deny. You can't lie to her because she knows. And that is precisely the experience that I've had with this man. You cannot lie to him. When he asks you something about yourself, you either answer it in an honest way and you humiliate yourself, or you perceive to humiliate yourself, or you lie. And if you lie, it just stares you in the face until you tell the truth. It's kind of like do you have enough gum for everyone in class, Jeff?
Funny
no?
enough, I just saw the movie The Box the other day, and I can't remember. They had a classroom scene, and I don't remember who they were talking about, who, some famous person, probably Dante, but I don't remember, who said that hell is being an eternity with people. Hell is being in the room with people, and people who know you. That you can't, there's, basically what you just said, that you cannot hide from anything from, that's hell. And I thought,
Well, you're completely naked. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to think
and
that's
Graham,
hell, that's not a good thing.
Right. I mean, you do feel exposed and vulnerable, and that's somewhat uncomfortable, but again, it's come down to me, and I've said this before in years past, that in all the time in ufology, with all of the wacky stuff that's happened, and then the even wackier experience of meeting certain people, and then people coming and going from my life and all this, I've learned next to nothing about the experience itself, what it is, where it comes from, where it's going to, how it's evolving. I know next to nothing about that, but I've learned volumes upon volumes about me. And that's exactly what this current experience seems to be doing, the same thing. It's like it's not telling me a great deal about its origins or where it's coming from. I'm not able to gather evidence from it to show other people. I'm not even allowed to talk about the totality of this. But I'm learning volumes about me, and some of it is decidedly uncomfortable. Some of the things there's no way I'd go on a public forum and talk about. But and that's not to say I've got some deep, dark, horrible secret. It's just delving into the nature of why I am who I am, why I'm an angry person most of the time. And I think I've become a much less angry person since this started. I think you could probably attest to that.
He used to beat me a lot. A lot of people don't know this about
you. Yeah. I mean, Jeremy's had to have major dental work done. So
I'm better now.
But I think that's where it's gone for me, is that it's about, why am I looking at this? Why do I feel this certain way about this certain person or that person? Or how do I interact with the family? And why do I interact with the family on certain levels that I do? And then you explain, well, it's this, and it pissed me off, and it's that, and it just sits there and stares you in the face, and it knows that that's not the answer. That's the answer you tell a psychologist. That's not the one you're going to tell me. You know what I mean? That's where it goes. So when Graham said that, I was just like, there it is again. You're not going to lie. You're naked in front of this thing, and you're either going to admit it or it's just going to stare you down even harder. And I think, you were talking earlier about how does this thing in the psychedelic experience, how does this thing change, or how does it compound? McKenna talks about when he first learned of psychedelics, it was presented in the framework of instant psychotherapy. You have to wonder if you're at peace with yourself and you're, which is somebody I look at and I say, Brandon is at peace with himself. That's why he's so calm, and that's why he exudes sereneness, but when you're not, I have to wonder if she comes on to you as this serene vision, but as you confront your own issues, that's when it gets ugly. That's when it puts on its ugly face and says, see, I can be ugly too. It's responding to you, and what have we said about everybody from Dorothy Izot to ourselves, in that, this thing presents a reflection like it's a mirror. It's holding up the mirror, and you're naked in front of your own mirror. Because if you think you don't lie to yourself all your life, you're wrong too. We've all got that aspect about us, and you can't do that with this. That's the problem. That's where the demons come from. They're you. This is all the direction that I'm thinking about with this stuff.
He is me.
Yeah, well, it's all you. I mean, it's all to a certain degree you. I mean, you're right. You said this countless times to me, and I'm like, I feel like the guy from Idiocracy. It's got electrolytes. I don't know what you mean. You know,
See, you
and
always
now
tell me you don't know what I
it
mean,
is.
and then you do. So I don't. You should just wait 5
Well,
minutes
and then
before saying I don't know what you mean, and then you realize that you did.
I think it's clear to anybody at this point that we have approached this from two completely different standpoints, and that I've approached it from investigating these things and trying to learn more about the mechanism of why and how. And there is no why, as George has told us. And I think because of how it's interacted with you, you've approached it on a more spiritual level or more, and that's not to say you're not critical about it. You definitely are, but you've approached it from a completely different angle than I have. And so a lot of, I think a lot of the stuff we say to each other, we don't quite connect immediately on, but it comes around in time. So why the ghost thing for me? Because the investigative part of me says there's something there that I might be able to bring back that is what might seem more tangible to people that, I don't know, might do something. It's more than the Ghost Hunter show where they go, huh? What do you think? Huh? It's more than that. It's, there's this need in me for this tangibility of what you can experience and can you document it? That's always been my thing is if all this stuff happens, why can't we document it? Why is it always just the dangling carrot just out in front of us out of reach?
Well, on that note, we should wrap this up and tease the ghost episode with, in fact, we were dangled a carrot that we could document for about an hour at a bus station. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know if we're going to tell that whole story.
No.
But suffice to say that Jeff and I had a shared UFO encounter, of course, after we had packed away the camera equipment after the Ghost of Gettysburg thing. But I was able to snap off a couple of shots of this one of two lights or objects or whatever they were that I'll put on the website when we do the Ghost of Gettysburg stuff next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And
but that was clearly a dangle. That was clearly, hey, look at me, and now you're going to get to take photos of this.
Oh, it was undeniable. It was undeniable. Yeah. And it responded to us directly and immediately. And I've since been back to that locale and have found no evidence of anything. I mean, well, I guess we'll get into it more on the next episode of what exactly happened. But I guess my goal in going to Gettysburg is I want a ghost and a flying saucer in the same shot. I think if I can pull that off, I'll retire. That's what I'm after.
In the great green room there was a telephone, and a red balloon, and a picture of the cow jumping over the moon. And there were 3 little bears sitting on chairs, and 2 little kittens, and a pair of mittens, and a little toy house, and a young mouse, and a comb and a brush, and a bowl full of mush, and a quiet old lady who was whispering hush. Good night room, good night moon.